As nations grapple with the ever-evolving landscape of global security threats and geopolitical tensions, the allocation of resources towards military might has long been a contentious and closely scrutinized issue. One metric that provides a revealing glimpse into a country's defense priorities is its military expenditure as a percentage of gross domestic product, GDP. This figure, which measures the share of a nation's economic output dedicated to its armed forces, has fluctuated significantly over the past century, reflecting the ebb and flow of conflicts, ideological shifts, and shifting global power dynamics. In the aftermath of World War I, the United States found itself thrust onto the global stage as an emerging superpower. However, the nation's military spending as a percentage of GDP remained relatively modest, hovering around 1% throughout the 1920s, according to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. This period of relative peace and economic prosperity allowed the country to focus its resources on domestic priorities, with defense taking a back seat to the booming industrial and technological advancements of the Roaring Twenties. The onset of the Great Depression and the subsequent rise of militaristic regimes in Europe and Asia ushered in a new era of global instability. As tensions mounted, the United States began to ramp up its military spending, with the defense budget reaching 1.7% of GDP by 1939. This increase, however, paled in comparison to the unprecedented mobilization that would follow in the wake of the nation's entry into World War II. As the United States committed itself fully to the Allied war effort, its military expenditure skyrocketed, peaking at a staggering 37.8% of GDP in 1944. This massive investment in the nation's armed forces was a testament to the existential threat posed by the Axis powers and the unwavering resolve of the American people to secure victory at any cost. The end of World War II ushered in a period of relative peace and economic prosperity, allowing the United States to scale back its defense spending. However, the onset of the Cold War and the ever-present threat of nuclear conflict with the Soviet Union ensured that military expenditure remained a significant portion of the nation's budget. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, defense spending hovered around 10% of GDP, reflecting the nation's commitment to maintaining a robust military deterrent against the spread of communism. The Vietnam War, however, would prove to be a turning point in the nation's defense spending trajectory. As the conflict dragged on, public support for the war effort waned, and the economic toll of sustaining such a large-scale military operation began to mount. By 1968, defense spending had reached a peak of 9.4% of GDP before gradually declining in the latter years of the war. The post-Vietnam era saw a concerted effort to rein in defense spending, with the military budget dipping to a low of 4.7% of GDP in 1978. However, this period of relative restraint was short-lived, as the Reagan administration ushered in a new era of military buildup in response to the perceived threat posed by the Soviet Union. Defense spending surged once again, reaching a high of 6.2% of GDP in 1986. The end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union brought about a new era of global stability and a corresponding shift in defense priorities. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, military spending as a percentage of GDP remained relatively stable, hovering around 3–4%. However, the events of September 11, 2001 and the subsequent launch of the global war on terror would once again reshape the nation's defense spending trajectory. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, the United States embarked on a massive military buildup, with defense spending reaching a peak of 4.7% of GDP in 2010. This surge in expenditure was fueled by the ongoing conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as the broader effort to enhance the nation's counterterrorism capabilities and bolster homeland security. As the United States withdrew from these protracted conflicts and sought to rebalance its defense priorities, military spending as a percentage of GDP began to decline once again. By 2023, according to SIPRI data, defense expenditure had fallen to 3.2% of GDP, reflecting a shift towards a more sustainable and fiscally responsible approach to national security. Throughout this century-long journey, the United States military spending as a share of GDP has ebbed and flowed, reflecting the nation's evolving security challenges, economic realities, and shifting geopolitical priorities. From the depths of the Great Depression to the heights of World War II, from the Cold War standoff with the Soviet Union to the global war on terror, the allocation of resources towards defense has been a constant source of debate and scrutiny. As we look to the future, the question of how much of the nation's economic output should be dedicated to its armed forces will undoubtedly continue to be a contentious issue. Striking the right balance between ensuring national security and addressing pressing domestic priorities will require a nuanced and pragmatic approach, one that takes into account the ever-changing global threat landscape, while also recognizing the economic realities and fiscal constraints facing the nation. In the words of former President Dwight D. Eisenhower, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. These words, uttered over 6 decades ago, remain as relevant today as they were then, serving as a poignant reminder of the delicate balance that must be struck between military might and economic prosperity. As the United States navigates the challenges of the 21st century, the lessons of the past century will undoubtedly inform the nation's approach to defense spending and its role in shaping the global security landscape. By understanding the ebb and flow of military expenditure as a percentage of GDP, we can gain valuable insights into the priorities and challenges that have shaped the nation's trajectory and perhaps glean wisdom to guide us through the uncertainties that lie ahead.